I stood at the edge of the grave, soaked in black wool and disbelief. The funeral was too quiet. No jokes, no music, just rain tapping against the green canopy like it was afraid to interrupt. Caleb would have hated this. He was the louder twin, always first to talk, first to fight, first to laugh at his own jokes. I couldn't picture him going out like this. Low voices, tissue boxes, stiff handshakes. It felt fake, forced. My wife, Jessica, clutched my hand with sharp, painful grip. My parents sat up front in perfectly ironed clothes and practiced frowns. Dad nodded at the priest like they were closing a deal. Mom adjusted her silver bracelet mid-prayer. The casket started to lower. My throat clenched. My hand reached for my phone without thinking, years of muscle memory. Just one buzz. A text from Caleb's number. I'm not dead. That's not me. My heart stopped. I glanced around quick and sharp, at the trees, cars, the man with the umbrella by the hearse. No movement, just gray skies and the sound of soil hitting wood. I texted back with trembling fingers, what the hell is going on? A few seconds passed. Another buzz. Can't say more. They're listening. Don't trust Jessica or Mom and Dad. My legs felt like rubber. I shoved the phone back, forced my face neutral and stared straight ahead. When the final prayer wrapped up, people filtered out slow. Jessica leaned into me, whispered, "We should go." Her breath on my neck made me flinch. Too cold, too calculated. That wasn't my brother in the box. And whoever planned this funeral was lying next to me in bed. If you crave real gripping stories where justice hits hard and betrayal never goes unpunished, this channel is your new favorite place. Please subscribe. But to understand how deep this conspiracy went, I need to take you back to what I found in his apartment. That night I didn't sleep. Just lay there with Jessica curled up next to me like nothing was wrong, like my world hadn't cracked open in one text. I kept my eyes shut, breathing steady, pretending to be asleep. But every nerve in my body was screaming. I got out of bed before sunrise. Didn't say a word to Jessica. Just grabbed my keys, threw on a hoodie, and drove 2 towns over to where Caleb lived. A studio above a beat-up auto repair shop with a busted neon sign. When I stepped inside it felt wrong. Like the place had been bleached. No dishes in the sink. No hoodie on the couch. No half-written song lyrics on the whiteboard he kept by his bed. His acoustic guitar was gone. His laptop, even his stupid lava lamp from college. The only things left were a jar of pickle relish in the fridge and a single beer. Caleb hated pickles, used to gag at the sight of them. So either someone else stocked that fridge or someone wanted me to think he did. I stood in the middle of the room trying to feel his presence, but it was like he'd never existed. It wasn't just cleaned, it was staged, sanitized, scrubbed of Caleb. That's when the kid in me kicked in. Back when we were 8, we used to hide notes and toys from Mom when she was in one of her moods. We had hiding spots, clever ones. I walked straight to the old wooden dresser he'd dragged from our parents' attic years ago. Pulled it out from the wall. There it was, a fake outlet cover just like we used to use. I popped it off and inside was a small Ziploc bag taped deep into the drywall. My hands were shaking now, more from adrenaline than fear. A burner phone. It still had battery. I powered it on, expecting some kind of lock screen. Instead it asked for a passcode. I tried the first thing that came to mind, our old PlayStation cheat code for that game we spent a whole summer beating. Shadow 98. The screen unlocked. There were only 3 contacts saved. One labeled Iris, one called Wolverine, and another as Safe House. No texts, no calls, no photos, just one video file. I sat on the bare mattress, thumb hovering over the file. Then I tapped it. The screen flickered. Caleb's face appeared, gaunt, sweaty, his voice uneven. He was outside somewhere, maybe in a forest or near mountains, trees behind him, wind crackling through the mic. "If you're watching this," he said, "then either I made it out or I didn't." My throat tightened. He glanced off camera like he was checking for something. "The funeral, it's fake. Someone close to us set it up. I'm not safe, Mason, and you're not either if they think you're asking questions." He leaned closer to the screen, and I could see a long scratch down the left side of his face. "Start with Jessica. She's not who you think she is. And if you're brave enough, ask Dad about Project Cerberus." He paused like he wasn't sure whether to keep going. "Don't trust Mom. No matter what, she's deeper in this than you think." The screen wobbled like he'd tripped or adjusted his grip. "I found something. Stuff I wasn't supposed to see. Files, names, things that could take the whole operation down. That's why I ran. That's why they want me gone." The video ended there. Just cut off. No goodbye. I sat there, heart pounding like I'd run 10 blocks. I stared at the phone, trying to absorb what I'd just heard. I wasn't some conspiracy nut. But this wasn't a joke. My brother had faked his own death to escape something he believed would kill him. My eyes drifted toward the window. I couldn't shake the feeling someone was already watching me. Sunday afternoon, I pulled into my parents' driveway. The siding was still cracked near the garage. The same hedge needed trimming. But the air felt different now, heavier, like I was walking into something I couldn't walk back out of. Dad was in the backyard, manning the grill like it was just another day. Same faded apron, same can of beer sweating in his hand. He didn't look up when I stepped onto the deck. "I got burgers and brats," he said. "You hungry?" I ignored that, walked straight to the patio chair across from him and sat down. My hands were clenched under the table. "What happened at Project Cerberus?" His hand stopped mid-flip. The spatula hovered above the flames. One of the burgers blackened and started to smoke. He didn't notice. He turned his head slow, eyes locked on mine. "Where'd you hear that name?" "Caleb," I said. "He sent me a message. Told me the funeral was a cover. Told me everything leads back there." The grill hissed louder, grease hitting open flame. He didn't move to turn it down. Just stood there, jaw tight, thinking. "Cerberus," he said, voice low like he was telling me a bedtime story from hell, "wasn't a military base. It was a research contract. Private money, government oversight in name only." He finally turned the heat down and stepped back. "I worked there. Data management, logistics intake. Nothing deep, but enough to know what they were doing." "What were they doing?" He hesitated like he thought maybe I didn't deserve the truth. "They called it emotional resonance programming. Human testing on psychological bonding, memory sharing, behavioral synchronization. The works." He looked past me into the trees like the past was hiding there. "Caleb got hurt 2 years back. You remember that, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Car accident. Cracked ribs, concussion." "Wasn't an accident." His voice was flat. "He volunteered for the program right after that. Told us it was experimental therapy for trauma victims." "It wasn't." He took a sip of his beer, long and slow. "They fed him a custom protocol. Targeted neural stimulation, chemical mood regulation, paired trauma experiences. The whole point was to see how far they could push emotional bonds when they're artificially enhanced." I felt my spine lock up. "You let them use him?" "I didn't let anything," he snapped. He was 26 years old. Legal adult. Thought he was getting cutting-edge treatment for his injuries. "But it worked, didn't it?" I asked. "Whatever they did, it stuck." Dad didn't answer right away. Just watched the coals like they owed him something. "It worked," he finally said, "until it didn't." He started losing time, having what they called cross-echo experiences, like he'd feel things you were feeling, like your minds were synchronizing across distance. I blinked hard. "That's not real." "It is now," he said. "That's why they shut it down officially. But unofficially, the people funding it saw something else. Not therapy, not medicine." He looked me dead in the eye. "They called it asset retention. Train loyalty into operatives by rewriting how they process emotional attachment. Strip away individual self-preservation, replace it with bond protection." I pushed back in my chair. My breath was shallow. "So you're telling me Caleb faked his death to get out of that?" "He didn't fake it for fun, Mason. He faked it because someone was going to erase him for real. He got hold of something, a full data dump of the testing protocols. Names, locations, financial records." Dad moved the burgers off the flame and shut the grill lid with a hollow clang. "If he contacted you, that means someone slipped up. You were supposed to think he was gone." "I saw the video," I said. "He said not to trust you. Or Mom." Dad leaned against the railing, suddenly looking older than I'd ever seen him. "You think I like this? You think I haven't spent the last 2 years waiting for a knock on the door, wondering if I'd wake up to news that both my sons had disappeared? Then why didn't you do something?" "I tried," he said. "They shut me out. I was a contractor, not a decision maker. But they kept your mother. She was deeper in than me." "What does she know?" He looked away. Didn't answer. "I want names, files, whatever you've got." He laughed under his breath, joyless. "You think I kept souvenirs?" "I buried it like I was told to." "So what now?" He stepped closer. "Now you've got 2 options. Disappear or finish what he started. But if you stay in the middle, they'll tear you both apart." I stood, didn't shake his hand, didn't say thank you. Just walked off the deck and got in my truck. The next morning, Jessica made coffee like she always did, but I watched her differently now. Every movement seemed calculated. The way she handed me the mug. The way she asked about my day. The way she touched my shoulder when she walked past. "You seem tense," she said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. Everything okay? I studied her face, the same face I'd been looking at for 3 years, the same green eyes, the same slight scar on her chin from when she fell off her bike as a kid. At least that's the story she told me. Just thinking about Caleb, I said. She nodded, expression sympathetic. It's normal to feel lost after something like this. Maybe you should talk to someone. Like who? A therapist? Someone who specializes in grief counseling. I almost laughed. How convenient that she'd want me talking to a professional about my delusions. Maybe, I said. Actually, can I ask you something? Of course. How did we meet? She blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? I mean, where exactly did we first meet? What was the conversation? Her eyes narrowed slightly. Mason, that's a weird question. We met at the bookstore on 5th Street. You were reading some sci-fi novel in the cafe section, and I asked if you'd recommend it. What was the book? Pause. Too long. I don't remember the title. It was 3 years ago. I nodded, taking a sip of coffee. But I remembered perfectly. It was Neuromancer by William Gibson. A book about artificial intelligence and corporate conspiracies. How fitting. And what did you do for work when we met? Another pause. Marketing research. For a consulting firm. Which firm? Mason, why are you interrogating me? I'm not interrogating. I'm just trying to remember details. Grief makes everything fuzzy. She softened, reached across the table to touch my hand. I worked for Hartwell Strategic. Market analysis, consumer behavior research. You know this. I did know this. But now I was wondering if any of it was true. Can I see your old business cards? What? From Hartwell. I'm thinking about career changes, maybe getting into research. Thought I could use you as a reference. She withdrew her hand. I don't keep old business cards, Mason. That's not normal. Neither is my brother texting me from beyond the grave. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Jessica went completely still. What did you just say? I met her eyes. Nothing. I'm just stressed. But the damage was done. I could see the calculation behind her expression, the gears turning. I think you should take the day off, she said. Stay home, rest. I'll make some calls, find you someone to talk to. That's okay. I've got errands to run. What errands? Every question felt like a trap now. She nodded, but I caught her glancing toward her purse, toward her phone. I love you, she said, but it sounded like she was reading from a script. I kissed her forehead and left for work, but I didn't go to work. Instead, I drove to the public library downtown and used their computers to research everything I could about Hartwell Strategic. What I found was a company that existed on paper but had no real presence. A website with stock photos and generic corporate language. No employee directory, no case studies, no actual evidence of work being done. Jessica's entire professional history was a lie. I spent 3 days researching everything I could find about twins, psychological experiments, and government research programs. Most of it led nowhere. Conspiracy websites, debunked studies, urban legends. But then I found something real. A news article from 18 months ago about a lawsuit filed against a company called Nexus Behavioral Sciences. The plaintiff was a woman named Dr. Iris Chin, a former researcher who claimed the company was conducting illegal psychological experiments on twins and other genetic siblings. The case had been settled out of court. Dr. Chen's current location was unlisted. But I remembered that name from Caleb's burner phone. Iris. It took me 2 days to find her. Finally, I found a paper sheet co-authored on trauma bonding in identical twins. Her bio listed her as working at a private practice in Boulder, Colorado. I called the number. Got an answering service. Left a message that I was Caleb's twin brother and needed to speak with her urgently. She called back 20 minutes later. You shouldn't be calling this number, she said without introduction. I got your contact from Caleb's phone. A long pause. Is he alive? I think so. He sent me a video. Said people were trying to kill him. Where are you calling from? My cell phone. Jesus Christ. Hang up. Drive to Boulder. Find the Sunflower Cafe on Pearl Street. Be there tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone and make sure you're not followed. She hung up. The drive to Boulder took 6 hours. I told Jessica I was taking a long weekend to clear my head, visiting some old college friends. She seemed relieved. At exactly 2 p.m. I walked into the Sunflower Cafe. It was crowded, mostly college students and remote workers with laptops. I ordered a coffee and found a table in the back corner. A woman approached 10 minutes later, Asian, mid-30s, wearing jeans and a navy sweater, carrying a worn leather bag. She had intelligent eyes and the kind of watchful posture that suggested she'd been looking over her shoulder for a while. "Mason?" she asked. I nodded. She sat down across from me, didn't order anything. "You look like him," she said. "Same bone structure, same way of sitting. But your eyes are different. How do you know Caleb?" She glanced around the cafe, then leaned closer. "I was his researcher. And eventually his friend. I'm also the reason he's running for his life." "What's Project Cerberus?" Her jaw tightened. "It's what happens when the government decides that human psychology is just another technology to be optimized." She pulled a tablet from her bag, opened it to a document that looked like a research proposal. Officially, it was a study on accelerated trauma recovery in military personnel. Unofficially, it was an attempt to create artificial emotional bonds that could be triggered and controlled. She scrolled to a section titled Twin Protocols. Identical twins were the ideal test subjects because they already have natural psychological synchronization, shared development, similar neural patterns, often intuitive emotional connections. I stared at the screen. There were photos of brain scans, charts showing hormone levels, detailed notes about bonding acceleration through controlled stress exposure. They used electromagnetic stimulation to enhance the natural empathic connection between twins. Combined it with controlled doses of oxytocin and targeted trauma experiences. The goal was to create operatives who would be literally incapable of betraying their assigned partner. And it worked. Better than they expected. Too well, actually. The subjects started exhibiting cross-sensory experiences, feeling pain their twin was experiencing miles away, sharing dreams, having synchronized physiological responses to stress. She closed the tablet. Caleb was one of the most responsive subjects they ever tested. But he was also the most unstable. What happened? He started accessing memories that weren't his own. Not yours, other test subjects. The electromagnetic enhancement had created unintended neural pathways. He was picking up residual psychological imprints from everyone who'd been in the testing chamber before him. My coffee had gone cold. I pushed it aside. How many others? Dozens. Mostly twins, some siblings, a few unrelated subjects who showed high empathic baselines. Ages ranging from 8 to 35. Children? She nodded grimly. The younger the subject, the more malleable their psychological development. Some of the most successful bonds were created in pre-adolescent twins. I felt sick. Where is he now? Last I heard, somewhere in the mountains west of Denver. He's been moving every few days, staying off-grid, trying to compile evidence. What kind of evidence? She reached into her bag again, pulled out a flash drive. Medical records, financial documents, video footage of testing sessions, communications between program administrators. She slid it across the table. This is a copy of everything he managed to download before he ran. Names, dates, locations, funding sources. Enough to bring down everyone involved. I picked up the drive. It was warm from her hand. Why are you helping me? Because I helped create this nightmare. I told myself it was legitimate research, that we were helping trauma victims. By the time I realized what it really was, dozens of people had already been damaged. She stood up. Your brother is one of the bravest people I've ever met. But he can't fight this alone. Where exactly is he? She wrote an address on a napkin. That's a ranger station about 40 miles west of here. There's a hiking trail that leads to an old fire lookout tower. He's been using it as a base camp. I looked at the address. How do I find him? You don't. You let him find you. Go to the trailhead tomorrow morning. Hike up to the tower. Wait. She started to leave, then turned back. Mason, your wife works for them. Your parents work for them. Everyone close to you has been compromised. From now on, assume every conversation is being monitored. She walked out of the cafe, leaving me alone with a flash drive full of evidence and the terrible understanding that my entire life had been a lie. I drove to the trailhead at dawn, parked next to a weathered wooden sign that read Fire Tower Trail 3.2 miles. The parking lot was empty except for my rental car. I'd spent the night in a cheap motel reading through the files on Iris's flash drive. What I found was worse than I'd imagined: detailed documentation of psychological torture disguised as medical research. Photos of children strapped to monitoring equipment. Video footage of twins being deliberately separated and traumatized to test their bond resilience. And through it all, clinical notes written in my mother's handwriting. Subject exhibits strong protective response when twin is threatened. Recommend increasing stress threshold to test breaking point. Emotional attachment remains stable after 72 hours of separation. Proceeding to Phase 3 protocols. My mother hadn't just been involved, she'd been one of the primary researchers. The trail was steep and rocky, winding through dense pine forest. I'd packed light, water, energy bars, the flash drive, and my phone, though there was no signal this far from town. It took me 2 hours to reach the fire tower, a skeletal metal structure rising above the tree line. The observation cabin at the top looked abandoned, windows dark, access ladder rusted but functional. I climbed up, muscles burning from the hike and altitude. The cabin was empty except for some old radio equipment and a logbook that hadn't been signed in years. I sat down to wait, looking out over the mountain range that stretched to the horizon. The silence was complete. No cars, no voices, no electronic noise. Just wind and the occasional call of a hawk. 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps on the ladder. Caleb's head appeared through the trapdoor, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. He looked like he'd been living rough, beard grown out, clothes dirty, a long scar down the side of his neck that hadn't been there before. "You found me," he said. Iris helped. He climbed into the cabin, moved with the careful economy of someone who'd been running for a long time. He was thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp, alert. "You shouldn't have come. Where else was I supposed to go? My wife is a spy, my parents are war criminals, and my brother is supposedly dead." He almost smiled. "Fair point." He sat down across from me, pulled a battered laptop from a backpack I hadn't seen him carrying. "How much do you know?" Iris gave me the files. I read about the program, the testing, I struggled to find words. "The torture. That's just the surface," he said. "The real crime isn't what they did to us. It's what they're still doing." He opened the laptop, showed me a spreadsheet with hundreds of names, ages, locations. "These are current test subjects. Kids mostly. Twins and siblings pulled from foster care, runaways, children of parents who owe debts to the wrong people." I felt my stomach drop. It's still happening? Bigger than ever. They've got facilities in 6 states now, all operating under different shell companies. Medical research, behavioral therapy, trauma treatment, but it's all the same program. He scrolled to another document, this one showing financial records. They've received over $40 million in funding in the past 2 years. Government contracts, private investors, pharmaceutical companies interested in the neurological enhancement protocols. Who's running it? That's what I've been trying to figure out. The operational structure is compartmentalized. No one person has access to everything. But there's someone at the top, someone coordinating all the different facilities. He pulled up a series of encrypted communications, messages that had been partially decoded. "Look at this. Authorization codes, funding approvals, operational directives. All signed with the same identifier, Phoenix." I studied the screen. The communications were clinical, detached, discussing human test subjects like they were lab equipment. "Any idea who Phoenix is?" "I have a theory. But I need more proof before I can move on it." He closed the laptop, looked at me directly. "Mason, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. How long have you been married to Jessica?" 3 years. "Why? How did you meet her?" "At a bookstore. She asked about a book I was reading." "What book?" "Neuromancer." He nodded grimly. "They assigned her to you before you even knew I was in the program. She's not just a handler, she's your psychological anchor." "What does that mean?" "It means they've been using your relationship to monitor my mental state. Twins have empathic connections, especially under stress. By controlling your emotional environment, they were able to influence my psychological stability." The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture I didn't want to see. Every fight you had with Jessica, every time she made you happy or sad or anxious, I felt it too. They were using her to experiment on both of us simultaneously. I thought about the past 3 years, all the times I'd felt inexplicably depressed or agitated, all the times Jessica had seemed to know exactly what to say to calm me down or wind me up. How long have they been doing this to us? Since we were kids, Mason. The car accident that supposedly started my involvement? I was already in the program. Had been for years. They just needed a cover story to explain why I was spending time at medical facilities. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo from our childhood, the 2 of us at a summer camp, maybe 10 years old. "Remember Camp Wildwood?" I nodded. We'd gone there for 3 summers in a row. It wasn't a camp. It was a testing facility. All the activities were psychological assessments. The counselors were researchers. They were studying our twin bond, mapping our emotional responses, building profiles they could use later. I stared at the photo, trying to reconcile my memories with this new information. I remembered Camp Wildwood as fun, swimming, hiking, making friends. But now that I thought about it, there had been a lot of strange games, involving psychological tests, separation exercises, stress response challenges. Mom and Dad knew? They were recruited when we were 8. Dad got a job with a defense contractor that turned out to be a front. Mom was offered a research position that paid 3 times her teaching salary. By the time they realized what they'd signed up for, we were already too deep in the program to get out safely. The scope of the deception was staggering. My entire life, childhood memories, career choices, marriage, family relationships, all of it had been shaped by people studying me like a lab rat. What do we do now? Caleb looked out the window toward the mountains. Now we finish what I started. We expose everything, the program, the funding, the victims, all of it. How? He reached into his backpack, pulled out a small device that looked like a satellite phone. This is a direct uplink to WikiLeaks, Anonymous, and about 20 other organizations that specialize in exposing government crimes. Once I upload the files, they'll be distributed across hundreds of servers worldwide. No way to stop it or suppress it. Why haven't you done it already? Because once I do, there's no going back. They'll come after us with everything they have. We'll spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. I thought about Jessica, about my parents, about the life I'd built that turned out to be an illusion. What life? Everything I thought was real was constructed by the people who've been experimenting on us. He nodded slowly. That's what I was hoping you'd say. He powered on the device, began uploading files. The progress bar showed 847 documents, 12.3 gigabytes of data. How long will this take? About 2 hours. Which means we have 2 hours before every federal agent in Colorado starts looking for us. I looked around the fire tower, suddenly aware of how exposed we were. Maybe we should find somewhere else to wait. No, he said. This is good high ground. We can see anyone coming from miles away. The sound of helicopter rotors interrupted me. Distant but getting closer. We both looked toward the horizon. 3 black dots moving fast across the sky, heading straight for us. Upload's only at 60%. Caleb said, checking the device. The helicopters were close enough now to see clearly, military style, no visible markings. How did they find us so fast? Caleb looked at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. Your phone. Even with the GPS turned off, they can triangulate your location through cell tower signals. I pulled out my phone, stared at it like it was a poisonous snake. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Forget it. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they're in range. He grabbed his backpack, started packing up the laptop and upload device. 85%. We need to buy more time. The helicopters were close enough now to hear the individual rotor beats. There was nowhere to run. We were on top of a mountain, surrounded by miles of wilderness. There, Caleb pointed to a cluster of large boulders about 50 yards from the tower. We can take cover there, keep them from landing directly on the tower. We climbed down the ladder fast, ran for the rocks. Behind the boulders, Caleb checked the upload device again. 92%. The first helicopter circled the tower, looking for a place to land. The other 2 took positions on either side of our location, probably dropping teams to surround us. What happens if they catch us before it finishes? Then a lot of kids stay trapped in their program forever. 96%. I could hear boots on rock now, voices shouting coordinates. They were close. 98%. Whatever happens, Caleb said, don't tell them about the upload. Let them think we're still trying to negotiate. 99%. A man in tactical gear appeared on the ridge above us, rifle raised. Mason and Caleb Torres, you're surrounded. Drop any weapons and come out with your hands visible. 100%. Upload complete. Caleb looked at me and smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. It's done. We stood up, hands raised, and walked out from behind the rocks. The headlines started hitting while we were still being transported to Denver in the back of an unmarked van. One of the federal agents got a call, listened for a moment, then looked at us with something that might have been respect. WikiLeaks just dumped 847 classified documents related to illegal government experimentation on American citizens, he said. Anonymous is calling it the largest psychological warfare expose in U.S. history. By the time we reached the federal building downtown, the story was trending on every social media platform. #Project Cerberus was the #1 hashtag on Twitter. News vans were already setting up outside the building. They separated us for debriefing, put me in a small room with fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable chairs. A woman in a gray suit introduced herself as Agent Rivera. Mr. Torres, I need you to understand something, she said, settling into the chair across from me. As of 30 minutes ago, you and your brother became federal witnesses in the largest human rights investigation in Department of Justice history. She opened a tablet, showed me news feeds from CNN, Fox, MSNBC, all running the same story. Photos of children strapped to medical equipment, documents showing government funding, leaked communications discussing test subjects like inventory. Your upload worked. Every major news organization in the world now has copies of those files. There's no putting this back in the box. The trials lasted 6 months. 47 defendants, hundreds of witnesses, thousands of pieces of evidence. The media coverage was constant. Congressional hearings, documentary crews, investigative journalists uncovering new details about the program's scope and funding. Mom got 25 years for conspiracy and child endangerment. Dad got 15 for conspiracy and failure to report criminal activity. Jessica got 5 years with the possibility of parole, after cooperating with prosecutors and admitting she'd been feeding false reports to protect me for the past 18 months. But the central figure, Dr. Franklin Shepard, Phoenix, remained a ghost. Despite an international manhunt, he'd vanished completely. Swiss bank accounts had been emptied. Safe houses in 3 countries had been abandoned. Until 5 years later, when I received an unexpected visit. I was in my office at the Torres Foundation, reviewing case files for our latest investigation, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Mason, there's someone here to see you. Says he's a federal agent." Agent Frank Morrison looked tired, like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Mr. Torres, we found Dr. Franklin Shepard." "You found him?" 3 days ago, police in Geneva responded to reports of gunshots. They found Dr. Shepard dead in his study, apparent suicide. I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. "There's more," Morrison continued. He left behind a confession. 47 pages detailing everything: Project Cerberus, the shell companies, the funding sources, names of people who were never prosecuted. He handed me a thick folder. "He also left something specifically for you and your brother." Inside was a handwritten letter addressed to Mason and Caleb Torres. "You were supposed to be my greatest success," Shepard had written. "Twin subjects with perfect psychological synchronization, capable of achieving empathic connection across vast distances. The applications for intelligence work, military operations, even space exploration were limitless. But you became something I didn't anticipate. Not just connected to each other, but connected to a sense of moral purpose that overrode your conditioning. You chose justice over loyalty, truth over security. In the end, you taught me something I hadn't expected to learn. Human psychology can't be completely controlled, only influenced. The bonds that matter most, love, integrity, courage, aren't programmable. I destroyed hundreds of lives pursuing a theory that was fundamentally flawed. You destroyed my life's work by proving that theory wrong. Consider us even." At the bottom of the letter was a list of offshore bank account numbers and access codes. "There's approximately $12 million in those accounts," Morrison said. "Money that Shepard diverted from program funding over the years. He's instructed that it be turned over to your foundation for victim compensation and continued advocacy work." 3 months later, Shepard's confession triggered the largest congressional investigation into government experimentation programs since the 1970s. 17 current and former officials were indicted, including 2 sitting congressmen and a former Secretary of Defense. The Torres Foundation used Shepard's money to establish victim compensation funds, expand our investigative capabilities, and create a network of safe houses for whistleblowers and survivors. And for the first time in years, Caleb and I slept soundly, knowing that we'd finally honored the promise we'd made to each other in that fire tower, that the truth would come out no matter the cost. Today, 10 years later, I work with survivors of psychological experimentation and government abuse. Caleb lives peacefully on his Montana farm, raising vegetables and restoring old radios. We talk every Sunday. Our conversation's easier now, though we're still careful about trusting our own emotions. The program that tried to control us ultimately freed us. Freed us from the illusion that ordinary people are powerless, freed us from the belief that we can't make a difference against powerful institutions. We were supposed to be their perfect weapons. Instead, we became something they never anticipated, their perfect enemies. Sometimes justice takes time. Sometimes it requires people willing to sacrifice their safety for the greater good. But it comes eventually, if you're patient enough and brave enough to keep fighting for it. Would you have gone into the woods if it were your brother on the run? How would you handle discovering your spouse was assigned to monitor you? What would you do if you found out your parents were involved in harming you for money? Would you expose family members if it meant saving other victims? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where justice ultimately prevails over betrayal.